Welcome to the world of LearnX. Today we're stepping inside best practice and I'm joined by Ben Hanning, CEO of VetThing. So Ben, VetThing, it's quite a name. Tell us about the inspiration. Where did VetThing come from?
VetThing, it's a name that means quite a lot to me. It's kind of an unspoken thing that I didn't actually realize was being used by myself until somebody pointed it out, and that then became the name. So my wife isn't from the profession at all, and obviously social events, often there are numerous vets involved in that, numerous nurses, reception team from the profession, and often we'll get into detail of cases or whatever else, and sometimes my wife just looks at me and is kind of like, I really don't understand what you guys are talking about, and it became a bit of a thing where I would say, well, it's just one of those vet things. So whenever I say that, it's almost my excuse for it's probably not worth the time to explain that necessarily. So we're doing some work with the culture agency to help me kind of tailor my thought process around that. And every time they got to a question where it would probably take too long to explain the nuances of it, I would often say, oh, it's just one of those vet things. And that then became, it became the name. It kind of grew arms and legs. Originally it was a wild card, and then it became the actual name. So yeah, quite exciting. And I think it's also quite a good judge of those who know and those who get it, because obviously the veterinary profession is such a unique one in many ways. I think those who are from it just get the name. Sometimes there are just things we cannot explain, and it's a vet thing. It's visceral.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to come back to what VetThing is, what you're doing with VetThing, but let's go right back to the start, Ben. You are Dr. Ben Hanning. You're someone who's trained and worked as a vet. You're now working in leading something new and exciting in the veterinary sector. But what first drew you into wanting to become a vet? Tell us your story.
Origin story. Actually, when I first started exploring what I wanted to do as a career, I wanted to be an accountant. And I went and did some work experience in an accountancy firm. And it was a really successful firm, and the guy who ran it was hugely successful. You looked at what he was doing and you would think, wow, this is brilliant. But actually, he wasn't really fulfilled. And the more time I spent in my work experience with them, he kept expressing how unhappy he was with the profession, the life, and it really made quite an impression on me, which was, quite young. If that's the end point of where I'm going to get to, it's not for me. And I was actually really lucky. We were taking our family dog in, a dog called Holly, and the local vet asked what I was up to, what I was wanting to be when I was older. And I explained that I wanted to become an accountant, but went to see it. I wasn't sure anymore. And he offered me to come under his wing, come and see work experience, see what it was like as in a vet practice, because he thinks I would enjoy it. And the rest is history. He kind of became one of my early mentors in life. I was very lucky, even from a small height. He took me under his wing, gave me exposure, responsibility, and it was the way he acted, the way he was so passionate, even later in his career, of the profession, what they did, that really resonated with me. So I spent years doing work experience. Any free holiday I had, I'd try and get my parents to drop me off, and I'd work there, from the kennels right through to reception, you name it. You got a chance to explore it, and I absolutely fell in love with the vet world. Applied to become a vet. Went to university, obviously became a vet, and during the time while at university, I kept seeing experience there, and actually it was my first job that I took there. So yeah, he really impacted on me. He gave me the passion that he did, and the passion's never left. I'm really still very excited and optimistic for what we can do in the profession, even though it's changed considerably over the years.
So being an accountant really didn't add up for you, Ben.
I've ended up playing with numbers in the end, but in a different capacity, not my full-time job.
Absolutely. Well, I am the son of an accountant, so I understand there are a few different sides to that profession. Working with numbers and working with animals, they can be definitely opposite ends of the spectrum, but you're doing both of them in many regards. So give us a little bit of a snapshot of your journey from training to become a vet, practicing, and then becoming the CEO of a new group. Tell us about some of the things that you've been involved with over the past few years.
So, as I said, Cambridge graduate vet, came out into the first role in mixed practice in Yorkshire, in the practice that gave me a lot of my work experience. It was a great opportunity to be a proper vet, having been a student for so long, but they obviously knew me well enough that I was given quite a lot of leeway to kind of grow and start building my professional skills. I spent most of my clinical career in and around Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, both north, west, and east. And then actually I made the move into one of the early groups, IVC, back before obviously the merger with Evidentia. I joined them at less than 100 sites in a kind of operation project role. And got so much exposure in such a fast growing group. I did IT, marketing. I headed up the pet health club for the group at one point, and then eventually moved into more of a commercial role, the M&A side, the numbers that I originally thought I would want to do. And I spent a really great period of time getting trained up by some really great people who took me under the wing again. It was a good chance to see how big, large healthcare systems work. And at the same time, you also learn other areas such as, leadership and how close to the front line you need to be to really understand the impact that decisions make. After that, I moved to MediVet. It was my first executive role. So I joined to try and help with succession planning for the central partners that were still owning the business at that point. So I joined in the leadership capacity to kind of drive that one forward. Also working with all the partners at the local levels, and obviously balancing that kind of tension between central work and the local leadership and what they're wanting to do. It was the first time I've been in the branded model as well, which was very different. And then I spent the last couple of years actually in human dentistry, human private dental. So I joined a company called Portman, who were the biggest private dental company in the UK. And just at a point where they were starting to do a merge with the second biggest company, Dentex. And my role was to ensure as an executive that we brought that through. We made sure that the two cultures were aligned where we could, although that is exceptionally hard to do for the record. And the bit that really took from that is, although it was a different healthcare sector, there were a lot of similarities. And it's actually really quite refreshing to see the same problems that we see in the vet side being there as well. Not good that they're there, but it was nice to see different solutions to it and how they were working on it. So it gave me a lot of learnings. I really enjoyed it. And I left them in 2024, the end of 24, as chief commercial officer, and started to do some consulting. I wanted to see different healthcare worlds, so did some consulting in the vet side, the dental side, but also other healthcare sectors, so podiatry, skin cancer clinics. It was really exciting. Got to learn a lot about the models, and you get to see a lot of patterns as well. The more you look at and the more sectors you look at, the more patterns you see. There are certain things that fail consistently, and there's other things that just seem to work really well in some sectors, but not others. So yeah, that was really exciting. And during that journey, I got to meet the team at Vetopia, so Peter Thompson, the group CEO, and he started to talk through what they were doing. I knew of them from the European side already, but they weren't in the UK. And to cut a long story short, I was asked to join as the CEO and create what is now VetThing. And yeah, I think we're doing something a little bit different, which is quite exciting. I'm very keen we continue to be clinically grounded, which is one of my biggest things. And I'm not a big fan of cookie cutter approaches. I think that local uniqueness is really special, and every practice has their own quirks and nuances. And I think if we protect and look after them while working on areas that practices want to work on, I think there's a new model that we can do, something a bit different. So not your traditional career for a veterinary surgeon, but yeah, one that has seen me both in sector in the profession. Then I've moved out into a different profession, and I've seen quite a lot of differences. So yeah, it's exciting to be back. I'm really excited to bring something different back to the UK vet sector.
So being an accountant didn't quite add up. You tried to get your teeth stuck into the world of dental, but now you're back very much where you feel you belong. I was at your event, the London Vet Show, where we crammed about 500 people into a room for 50 people. But you said it feels a bit like a homecoming for you, Ben. So tell us about that.
So when you go into becoming anybody in the vet profession, I think no matter what role you're in, I think you put so much emotion into it, so much care, so much time into it. It's a profession that you'll always be passionate about, and it's something that is, no matter what I was doing, no matter where I am, I've always kept close to, whether it's in investing into startup healthcare businesses in the animal health sector to more broadly other areas. It's something that sticks to you, and I think there's always been something that people have joked to me, which is everybody who has been in the veterinary profession will go and generally at some point explore elsewhere at one point in their career, and they always come back. And I think it's something that I can say honestly, hand on heart, it does feel like coming home now that I'm back. And it feels like a really pivotal point in the profession where everything's changing considerably between the CMA, there's technology emerging, there's a lot going on. And I'm really proud to be able to come back and offer something for people who are wanting support and wanting to grow, but maybe don't necessarily conform with the other models that are available for them at this point. So yeah, we're trying to do something a bit different, and I'm really excited to offer that, and I'm looking forward to working back in the profession for the foreseeable. It's great.
So VetThing, as you mentioned, is part of an international group, Vetopia. But how's it different to the other corporate structures that people are familiar with in the UK market?
Now, this is a personal area of interest. So I think defining terms is really important. Obviously, people like to go corporate, independent. They're the two kind of defaults that people do, the binary piece. And I think there is a huge discrepancy in even the independent side. There is different scales of independent, and same with the corporate side in inverted commas. I think there's different scales. And I think one thing I'm very cautious of is I don't see corporate purely defined as ownership. I actually see it more of a behavior. I think where you start centralizing decision making and doing a lot of standardization that potentially can impact on judgment, that's where I find it more of a corporate. I'm deliberately classing myself as a group for what it's worth, and I'm happy to have that argument with anybody. We are country-led, we are a standalone part, although we are pan-European. I think there are shared values that we can take from that, but we have to be nuanced for every single part of that. So the UK is quite unique in many ways. For me, decision-making has to remain at a practice level. When you take that away from the practices, there is huge risk that decisions will be made that are too far away from the consult room and too far away from the front line. And sometimes that means you're not quite there on the reality of what impact it will have. So we're coming to support. We're here to help with building a community, and that community is not just in the UK. We've got a European wing to it, which is actually really exciting for those who are joining, getting to explore that. Big fan of shared learning. We have a VLearn platform, which is an online platform, and we do face-to-face education across all parts of the company regularly. It's really, really value add for all of us. We also provide capital. There's a lot of practices out there that are really wanting to do something different, grow, invest in parts, in equipment, new buildings, and that's something we can provide. So that is where we're coming in. The consistency, for what it's worth, we want to be consistent with our values and what we're trying to do, but I really don't believe in consistency of process and uniformity. I think there are areas that you do need that, especially on the financial side. Cybersecurity is another one that I think is really important to have uniformity on, but the rest of it should be nuanced. If these practices have run themselves for so long without the need of a group necessarily to change things, I'm definitely a fan of not changing things. If they're wanting to have support and they're wanting to look into areas where they can improve and reduce friction, that's kind of where the model really kicks in, and we can support, and we've got knowledge and connections, and we can bring that directly to that local leadership to help them with what they're wanting. So yeah, for me, again, sorry to get on a bit of a high horse there, but I think the corporate versus independent, there's variations of grey in between.
You said that a lot of people see things in quite a binary sense, independent, corporate. Is that presenting challenges for you as you introduce people to what VetThing is and what VetThing isn't?
Yeah, I think one of the recurring comments I get is, oh, you're just another corporate, is normally the first approach that a lot of people have, although maybe not quite as rude as that. A lot of people want to know why we're not just another corporate. So where I have a luxury, which not all do when you're bringing a new model in, is although in the UK it's unproven, it is a theoretical piece in the UK, it's actually got proof across Europe. We've got 230 practices that are showing that this model can work, although they are nuanced. In the UK especially, we've got different regulatory environment, there's different workforce reliabilities, the structure is different, and also culturally as well. We're quite progressed with especially humanization of pets, which, although you do see it emerging across the European platform, I think we are kind of at the forefront of that. Our intent is different. And I think our structure is different in terms of what we do. So although we do acquire practices, we actually partner with them, not at the practice level. We actually roll them up into the group level, so they get the benefits of a group shareholding, and we dilute ourselves out at the same level as me, the same level as our original investors. And that enables us to have true continuity and alignment on what we're doing. And it's not just for the people who own the practice as well. We want everyone to get a chance to be part of that. So senior members of the team, we really want to get them incentivized, the vets, the nurses, care managers, equivalent, anybody who's critical to running that practice and for succession planning in the future. It's a no-brainer to run in this way. We also don't necessarily believe in the kind of more stereotypical earn-out structures. So we look to a kind of a 5-year working plan with the business owners and the team, and we will work with them to deliver on that. It's not an annual targeted piece. We don't believe targets are the right way of making people want to do the right thing. So we spread it out over a 5-year period, and we don't have just 1 year takes it all as part of that deal. So yeah, I think if you were to compare, I'd say we're more of the mindset of a partnership than an acquisition, and much more of a collaboration than just forcing compliance as kind of our tone.
That's really helpful. It's really good, as you say, to look beyond the binary definitions. Language, as you say, Ben, correctly, is very, very important when looking at things. So a more general question, what do you think it takes for someone to run a healthy and sustainable practice in 2026? There are so many things changing in the world. You mentioned the CMAs already. Of course, we've got technology and AI. We've got new regulation. We've got lots of things happening in the world around us. What does it take to run a healthy and sustainable practice?
I think with any healthcare business, it's always the people. If you start with the people, that will be the best way of beginning. And when I say the people, the teams, it's really important that there are a few things that they need. And if you get them right, it can be hugely powerful. If you get them wrong, it can be hugely detrimental. So for me, I think teams need psychological safety at the first part. I think there's increasing worry about role security with a lot of people, and that can cause, bad decisions to be made. And also predictability. You can never predict the future, and especially in healthcare, you never can predict what will come through the door. But if people can have a kind of consistency and a feeling of calm where possible, I think that really does make people begin to feel safe. And if they're feeling safe, they bring better judgment, they collaborate better, they're willing to feed back. And I think that gives better care to the patients and to the clients that bring them through the doors. My personal working hypothesis, for what it's worth, I believe that if you have healthy, happy teams, rather than trying to outperform stress ones, they will always do better. If you do well and they're happy, I believe the financial performance will flow completely from that. You don't need to force the financial performance. I think you get the core right, the systems, the equipment, the safety, the rest comes through there. And that's what you see in some of the better practices in the UK. I will point out, however, financial stability is important still, especially because it's that margin that gives you the ability to reinvest. I think that's another part that will make successful practices is investment. And that investment is in the people. It's in obviously the leadership and the training to help them really be the best leaders that they can be. They're nice bits to invest in, the facilities, the system, but at the end of the day, you can have the best building in the world, you can have the best equipment in the world, but without the people and the people knowing what to do with it and they're then wanting to do the work, you've got nothing really there. So I think you've just got to be very cautious. The mindset has to be long term. If you start looking short term, you make bad decisions. And I think if you make bad decisions, you can start to really impact on goodwill. And healthcare businesses are all about goodwill, veterinary especially. And I think you've just got to take caution. People will always step up. I think if you were looking at the vet side specifically, if you lose a member of the team, people will cover gaps. They will absorb the pressure. Now that's great on the bottom line. And if you're an accountant, you look at that and go, fantastic. We've got less team members. We're still performing. We're probably performing better. But the reality is that is absorbing goodwill. That constant pressure eventually gets to the point where you'll start seeing long-term costs. There's going to be burnout, there'll be attrition, people lose trust, and I think performance just goes off a cliff. So for me, those are the kind of key areas that I focus in on, and I really think are critical to businesses to run well, veterinary businesses in 26.
Absolutely. It's more than just the numbers. Your accountant is a valued partner. You've got to look at the metrics that matter most, and there's things aside from marketing and financial KPIs to measure. So, Ben, what excites you about the future of UK veterinary practice? And what's keeping you awake at night every so often? What are some of the things you're a little bit scared about as we step into a new era?
I think the most exciting part is we have such crazy depth of talent and skills and professionalism that you'll see across this profession. Yeah, they're very much underestimated. And I think coming back into the vet world has really, really, really reinforced how amazing the people that run the practices are. I think we need to be increasingly open, especially around the kind of well-being side, the sustainability of practice life. And that excites me. If we can get that right, we can, especially using the AI, the technology, if we can remove friction, free up additional time, free up the ability for people to then make this job more sustainable than it has been in previous years. I think that's quite an exciting piece. The balance here is where you free up time is not to then just fill that back with trying to force things through. There's a balance of, yes, you can increase work, but actually if you do too much, you know better off than you were before. We need to make sure this is something that I don't want to be seeing vets and nurses dropping off because they're exhausted. If we can get this sustainable, I think we're in a great place to really drive into the future. And I think all the ingredients are beginning to bubble up to the point where we can really get that. I'm really, really, really excited. I think I look at the vet world like an ecosystem that over time has got kind of slightly condensed and slightly off-piste. It's not as diverse as it once was. And I think that is a detriment to what we're trying to do. But actually, we're seeing a huge emergence of both greenfields, so people are setting up day in, day out at the moment. I've never seen anything like it. It's brilliant. People are getting the confidence to go and do their own. And that excites me. I think we'll see new ideas, new concepts, new everything coming from these people going out and doing this. New models as well. We've got preventative care, subscription models. You've got our model. You've got everything coming through the door here. And that's exciting because with diversity, I think there becomes a more healthy ecosystem that people can really get excited by. And I don't believe there is a one model fits all for people, either at employment level or potentially a future partner level as well. So yeah, if we can combine the technology, I think the CMA will be also a pivot point. They're creating changes probably sooner than we necessarily expected them to be. But if we do this properly, we can probably get into a much more sustainable level. I'm not saying I agree with everything. I think there's a lot that's positive, but you'll have seen that there's a uniformity of thoughts around what is bringing and what challenges that will bring. So yeah, that's what excites me. I think there's huge opportunity to become more sustainable. I think there's going to be a much more varied ecosystem. I think there's a much more long-term view coming out with these new models than necessarily the kind of short-term kind of advantages. But worrying me, what keeps me up at night? Speed of change. Change can be great. Change can be good, but it can also be absolutely bloody terrifying for people. And especially when I think practices and the profession as a whole are feeling under a lot of pressure. The teams, the regulations, tech is changing. What do I do? What am I going to do? What's the right way? There's a risk of, I think if we make this pressure normal, I think there's a risk of that sustainability that excites me going down the pan. I think we've got to make sure that we time it right. And I think if we're not careful, people will rush to short-term views, that kind of cost-cutting, rushing systems in just to say that you've done it. And that means we just need to make sure it's not a bad thing. We just need to make sure that there's an age-old saying, my first boss used to say it, you measure twice, you cut once. And I think if we can take the time to do this right, I think there's a huge opportunity for it to be exciting. But that's what worries me. If we don't do it right and people rush into making decisions, and especially if the front end team that are doing all the hard work, that are bringing all the value, aren't consulted with these changes, I think that's the big danger and the big risk that comes from it.
You highlight a couple of things for me there, Ben, that I've been speaking with other people about the pressure on veterinary teams. Now, you're dealing with emergencies, with animals coming in, but you're also dealing with very stressed people in a work environment. One of our other guests for the Best Practice Summit shared some horrifying statistics around suicide in the veterinary profession. What do you think the CMAs might do in terms of unintended consequences that put more pressure on teams? What are some of the things that could really backfire in making things worse for the veterinary profession?
Sadly, I would say the mental health burden, suicide it's a recurring trend. I'm sadly been impacted myself with good close friends who are no longer here. It's one of the reasons why I think you were at our launch event. We partnered with VetLife. I think it's a really important charity for our profession. I think, especially in these changing, challenging times, having that support and the willingness to be open and discuss it is really important. In terms of the unintended consequences, I think the CMA, there are bits that they're doing which transparency, ownership structures, all of that is great. Easier decision making for clients, great. All of that, I think, good practice will do anyway, but we should reinforce it and make it more standard. I think what their risk is, the unintended consequences, is it's the admin burden. I think the CMA was there to try and support within reason the independent practices, and I think the burden seems to be landing more disproportionately on them and the smaller practices, which risks us reducing that diversity by stifling these smaller practices, having to comply with things that maybe don't necessarily add value to them. And obviously with that, these greenfield sites that are being innovative, trying to work together, collaborate, if we're not careful, that can impact as well. I think the shifting potentially of the total business model, obviously around long-term medication, the cost of that, will then impact probably on accessibility. So historically, we've been really poor at charging properly for our professional services. We've all talked about it for decades. We should charge more for our professional services and rely less on other parts of what we do. And actually, I think that will shift into that. And other countries, especially around the Scandinavian area, they really do this. They don't rely on dispensing drugs or anything, and they focus on their professional services. So, I think unintentionally, I think they may end up costing more to a client because you will need to have access to the professional care to do it. But at the same time, these businesses aren't going to take a reduction in what they're doing just because of the longer term medication piece. But that in turn can lead to exciting new models. And this is where I think technology comes in. The kind of telemedicine, teletriage, however you want to look at it, is an opportunity for that initial frontline potentially to be part of an extension of your team. I think there's some really cool models that are beginning to become increasingly important there. It's not all bad at all. I think there could be a lot of good. It's just, again, the concerns around the speed of change and what impact it'll have on the welfare of the animals and the accessibility. I think if we end up with less accessible care, we've failed, and the CMA especially have worsened the environment there. So as long as that's balanced, I'll be okay. But that's my big personal concern.
So what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's leading a team, they're a director, owner, maybe practice manager, through these turbulent times? What's one piece of advice that you would give to them?
Being clear on purpose, I think, is really important, and being clear on what makes you unique, what makes you special, and being intentional about your leadership as well. It's very easy to rely on goodwill, and there's so much goodwill that comes from the teams that we work with. I think if we can create an environment that is psychologically safe, where you can be curious and challenge, people can speak up and ask why something is being done the way that it is, I think you can address issues before they become an issue. I think where you leave them lingering because it's easy, sometimes it's hard to get that back, and the goodwill is lost. So for me, really, really important leadership is, no matter what level you're leading, there's leadership all the way through a veterinary structure, and everybody's leading in their own way. It's about presence. It's how you show up. And it's definitely not about control. If you try and control, you won't get the kind of maximum output from you or the people that you're leading. So for me, it's really important that you are there, your presence, and you understand the challenges. I think you can't lead if you do not understand how it works.
Some good advice there. So Ben, we're going to have a little bit of fun now. We're going to think about two scenarios. Now, as you'll know, and as the people watching and listening will know, we're at the Best Practice Summit. Our consultancy in the veterinary sector is best practice, but I'm sure you've seen some of the worst practices in your time in many years in veterinary. So let's talk about worst practice, our competitor down the road. What are some of the major dysfunctions when it comes to leadership and running a practice? Without mentioning any names, but without any filter, share some of the worst practices you've seen in terms of leadership over the years.
Where there is vast uncertainty, there's normally chaos, if I'm honest with you. I've locumed in practices where I turned up and they literally, and there's your consult room, off you go. There was no kind of, this is how we do things, this is what we do, this is what we believe in, these are our values. It was just, I'm a body, I'm a bum on a seat. And that's not good. It's not good for the clients, it's not good for the team, it's not good for those pets. I think that's really, really important. And that all stems to communication, I think, at the end of the day. So I think where there is clear clarity of purpose, and you're communicating that, and you're able to actually look at what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think that is great. I think the worst I've seen is where people are struggling potentially financially, for whatever reason, be it a macro issue, the world has completely gone to pot. There's been issues with government changes, whatever it is that's caused it, and they just go to short-term fixes. That is disastrous. I think you need to really take time to look and think, and what implications it will have, because sometimes just pulling one lever quickly, you completely skid the car off the road. So, I would say making sure the time is spent before you do it. Otherwise, you end up just fragile. Although on the surface it all looks calm, you end up with that. So those are the kind of worst bits that I've seen. But obviously that's not uniform, and I've seen that in every model. By the way, it's in independence. I've seen that in corporates, and just because your title, your terminology doesn't necessarily mean that it's it's a personal thing. And on top of that, it can be temporary as well. It's worth pointing out that every practice goes through a phase at some point, whether it's a loss of the team, a loss of a staff member, your really critical person that is leaving the country, whatever it is that's happening, it can be temporarily there. And I think the worst practices are those that don't jump onto that and support and make sure the team that are left are looked after, and especially when there's not the equipment you need to do your day job, and the buildings don't look good. Those are the kind of worst practices. You should be investing in the people and making sure it's a nice working environment, and they have the equipment they need to do the day job. If you don't have that, you will fail every time.
Let's avoid worst practice. Absolutely. So when it comes to the future of veterinary, Ben, do you see, or do you predict that we'll have dominant models or a much more diverse ecosystem?
There'll never be one dominant model. It just can't be. This profession is too unique. Every practice is too unique. And even in one model, there are nuances within every single practice within that model. I think diversity is one of the biggest strengths that we bring. The uniqueness, the way that people deal with the challenges is it's key. And actually, I think the communities that are built, they are vital for the future of what we do. And people often refer to the veterinary hive mind. I have a view, and part of the concept that I'm running with VetThing is, if you put the right people who've been there, done that, seen it, the practice managers, the business owners, the senior vets, senior nurses, there's a challenge that we're facing, and you put enough of them together, their hive mind will answer the question. Somebody will have seen it, and then maybe their solution wasn't perfect, but then somebody can build on it. So for me, again, it's that diversity that brings it, the ability to tap into those amazing people, the amazing knowledge that they have, and the depth of experience. I think if we don't tap into that, and we lose that, that is a huge detriment to the world of the vets. And that's why I think these multiple models have come in. I think the new emerging models give people an opportunity to choose what works for them. It's not one size fits all. I think you can definitely choose what works for you. And that could be you continue to operate in your own world. It could be that you want to be an employee owned trust. It could be that you want to join a group. It could be that you want to join a corporate. It doesn't really matter. I think that the big thing that matters to me is that we don't judge people's decisions. There should never be a judging of it. And that's something that I think we can do better as a profession. I think it's very quick to jump to they are bad, they're good. Whereas actually we should be working together as a profession to increase things. We should be kind. We should be looking after each other.
That's some good stuff there, Ben. I like the way that you shape things and frame things. You've got a good lexicon here, some good words and analogies. Now, I've got a question for you, Ben, because this is a little bit of a personal challenge I'm trying to work through and trying to understand the reasons behind this. The last 10 veterinary practices we've taken through our business health check, we asked the first question, which is, do you have a written business plan? And the answer from the last 10 vets that we went through this with has been no. I've got a question for you. Why do you feel it is so few veterinary practices do have written business plans? And what are some of the key ingredients that go into the 5-year plans that you do with people?
I think intrinsically, one of the big things that vet practices have had over the years is, especially when times are good and there are a lot of pets coming through the doors, there were probably less regulatory challenges. People would just keep coming to see your business often. And I think with that in mind, people have potentially not always needed to have a clear business plan. Now, it's not to say that people don't. It's a too broad a sweeping statement necessary to say that. And I think, I've seen written business plans of many practices. I've also seen verbal plans that they have in their head that they just have never put to paper. And then I've also seen those that are frankly winging it. And it's not to say that any of those decisions are a bad or a good way of doing it, but actually I do think if you spend the time to put what you're trying to do to paper, I mentioned before, I spent quite a bit of time with a culture agency to really formalize what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do it. And actually January is a really exciting point for me. Our first batch of practices that have joined us and partnered with us, I'm spending this month spending time with them to really put their kind of 5-year plan into paper where we can. Now, it doesn't have to be a prediction. And I think the big thing about 5-year plans is that, the best laid plans always go wrong from the moment you start to put them into the field. But that is something that, you just adapt them and you continue to ask why you're doing it, what you're doing. Is it aligned with what we're trying to get into? If you've got a purpose, you've got values, you combine them together, you've got a direction. I think it's much more reassuring for the team to know where we're trying to go. And the age-old adage of, how do you eat an elephant? You break it bite by bite. Break it in stages. Make sure you're reviewing those stages and celebrate every time you hit a stage as well. So for some practices, that's investment. For other practices, it's a broadening of their knowledge base. Somebody go on a new course to learn new skills, and that may bring new equipment. If you've got a broad direction, great if you can put it to paper and keep coming back to that, have it in your staff room, have it there for people to challenge. If we're moving away from those values, if we're moving away from that purpose, people should feel safe enough to challenge it. So that, I would say, is people, when they do firefighting, don't often spend the time and don't often realize the value to spend the time to do it. And I think actually what you're doing is fantastic to essentially not necessarily force them to spend the time, but if you ask the right questions and somebody's prodding them in the right direction, I think it makes them think about why, and asking the why, not just accepting that 5-year plan is the right thing to do. You should be challenging it, you should be curious, and between you can come up with often a much better solution, especially if you involve a broader team. It's always much better when people who are doing the work and actually really genuinely know what it means to be working on the front line of each individual practice. If they're involved and engaged in it, they're more likely to deliver on it, and they're more likely to provide the care that we want them to for the practices and the owners that come there.
So when it comes to major changes for a veterinary practice, perhaps getting investment, joining a group, or even selling and getting out, what are some of the things that people should be looking out for? I'm sure you've seen people do things for the right reasons and maybe they've not had the results they've been hoping for. When is it time to make a big change in your mind, Ben?
So when you say change, I think change comes in different variations. I think there is never necessarily a right time to make change. I think you need to look at the capacity of what you're doing, because if especially your leadership team is over capacitated, you then will never get the deliverance of the change that you're trying to do. It's one of the reasons why I think when you try and make massive changes in practice immediately, once they've, for example, joined a group, if you then try and make a lot of changes on day one, yes, great, you may be able to extract some synergies out quicker, but actually the disruption, the management time, the loss of goodwill, all of that is challenging. So I think you need to pace it for every single practice. In each one's different, and everyone has different challenges and different needs. And that's kind of why we've done the model the way that we have with VetThing. I think some practices are super efficient, operating in an amazing way, fully digitized. Others are operating in a more traditional way and are wanting to learn from those practices that are more digitized. And if you put the two together and you let them talk about what's good, what works, what doesn't work, I think you really get the output that you want. But is there a right time to make a change? No. Should you put off doing it? Absolutely not. Because if you constantly make an excuse for it, you'll never do anything. But I think, again, that's where putting to paper that kind of 5-year discussion, that 5-year plan, what we're trying to do, why you want to do it, it just kind of not forces you to consider it, but it makes you get to a point where, what the time is right, whether it's in 6 months or 12 months, or actually is it now? We need to make these changes. But it has to work for the team. It has to work for the practice. And most importantly, the leadership need to be fully engaged with it, because if they're not engaged with it, it will fall flat on the face.
What's one thing that we haven't talked about today that you feel is important for veterinary teams to hear loud and clear in 2026?
For me, 2026 is a big year of change for the vet world. I think the profession is undertaking regulatory change. I think we're seeing new, exciting, emerging models. We're seeing increased demand from clients and increased demand from the teams working in the practices to what their expectations are. I think it's really important that people recognize that there is change, and they recognize that it is coming, and they seek support as well in whatever way it is, whether it's third party, whether it's joining a group, whether it is bringing new skills into their existing team. I think accepting that the feeling of uncertainty is there is important. And I think if we continue to work with the view of the broader profession and what we're doing has to impact on that in a positive manner, I think they'll be in a really good place for us to continue to impact positively on the broader world. And we need to make sure that pressure isn't consistent and constant, but more occasional, and allowing them the time to care, and ensuring they get healthy work-life balance to enable the sustainability of that longer term, progression for them. And it may well be that the technology, the AI, whatever it is that decides to reduce that friction comes in, but it's not there yet. We're very much at the kind of precipice of it. So I don't think accepting that it's a one size fits all or there's a magic bullet is there, but we should explore, we should trial, and see what is working. And I don't think the future's fixed as such. I think there's such opportunity. The path ahead is huge. There's not one size fits all. There's no one model. I think it's a really, really exciting time, and I'm really optimistic for what we can do. And going back to some of my comments before, I think community is critical. That hive mind, the sharing of knowledge, sharing of skills, both within the practice, but then within a group, within your peers, if you can, across Europe, across the world. I think, and across sectors as well. Other sectors are doing things that we're not yet, and vice versa. They should be reaching out to us and seeing what we're doing well. So yeah, I'm really, really genuinely optimistic about what we've got. We've got such huge talent in this profession. And at the end of the day, as long as we continue to care and as long as we continue to deliver on that excellent care directly to those pets, I think we're in a great place. I'm really excited. I think we should continue to invest in this sector. I think we should continue to invest in the practices and the people and make sure they get everything that they need to feel safe, secure, and more importantly, do the job that they've come in to do every single day. So yeah, that would be my parting comments.
Amazing. Dr. Ben Hanning of VetThing, thank you so much for joining. It's been really insightful and great to hear a bit of your story and the journey you're on. So for everyone watching and listening, to make sure you get your CPD certificate, your certificate of attendance, please do head on over to the LearnX platform. We have a number of reflection questions for you to engage with. We'll see you on the inside. Take care.